Hello and welcome to the latest history stuff. This is the third episode dealing with the life and career of John de Vere, 13th Earl of Oxford, one of the most dynamic and interesting figures, in my opinion, of the period known as the Wars of the Roses. And at the end of the second video we left off with him and his allies, the Earl of Warwick, Warwick the Kingmaker, and George, Duke of Clarence, poised to re-invade England the second time round and try to destroy their enemy Edward IV, the Yorkist king. This is in 1470. And restore the Lancastrian king Henry VI, who had been held in the Tower of London for the past 6 or 7 years. So they launched this invasion and they land in Devonshire after a storm scatters Edward's ships at sea because he had been blockading the Lancastrian ships in port off the coast of Normandy. But this unexpected storm blows up, scatters his fleet, and this enables Oxford and his friends to land in the southwest. Their timing is very good because Edward himself is a long way away up in the north of England dealing with a revolt there. And this revolt was probably organised by Warwick's supporters in the north, which was a repeat of the strategy he had used a couple of years previously. Again, it works very well. Edward is distracted, and when he turns round to deal with this fresh invasion in the southwest, he finds that most of his men have betrayed him, abandoned him, which is quite a common theme in the Wars of the Roses. There's a lot of betrayal and backstabbing. And in particular, the Marquess of Montague, who happens to be Warwick's brother, John Neville. He abandons Edward because he's annoyed at being stripped of the earldom of Northumberland, which was a bit of a tactical error on Edward's part. He took away the earldom and tried to compensate John Neville with the title of Marquess of Montague, but he wasn't happy with that because the earldom was much richer, and he reckoned that this was a bit of a demotion. So in revenge, he unexpectedly abandons Edward's cause and very nearly captures him at Olney in Buckinghamshire. And Edward is forced to flee along with his younger brother Richard, Duke of Gloucester, later Richard III. And the two of them manage to hop aboard a ship, flee across the Channel and get to Holland, where they're forced to take refuge. And this means that Oxford and his allies, Warwick and Clarence, have apparently won the war without having to fight a battle this time. And they advance on London, meet no resistance, enter the capital, secure it, and they find Henry lodged in the Tower of London, and they are able to restore him. They have him recrowned at St. Paul's, King of England all over again. How much Henry himself by this point is really aware of what's going on is uncertain, because he suffered from this ancestral mental instability that he had inherited from his Valois ancestors. His mother, Catherine, had been married to Henry V back in the early 1420s, and her father, King Charles of France, he had gone insane. According to some accounts, he thought he was made of glass and had to be strapped down in case he fell over and shattered. And Henry sadly had inherited this mental instability, which got worse as he got older, and he buckled under the stress of the civil wars in England. Can't blame him really. And by this point, by the time he's dragged out of the tower and propped back up on the throne, he cuts probably quite a pitiful figure. I believe there's an account of him having to be tied to his horse as he's paraded through London on his way to St. Paul's, because otherwise he might have just fallen off, because he had no idea where he was really or what was going on. So he's very much a figurehead. And really England is now ruled by Warwick, Clarence and Oxford. Probably more Warwick, because he's the senior partner of this triumvirate. Clarence and Oxford are very much his sort of junior partners. But Oxford makes the most of the situation. One of the first things he does is that he persuades Warwick to make him Constable of England. Only temporarily, because what Oxford wants to do is get revenge on John Tiptoft, the Earl of Worcester. A very unpopular man nicknamed the Butcher of England, which gives you some idea of his character. And the reason Oxford wants to get revenge on him is because Worcester was the man who had condemned Oxford's father, the 12th Earl of Oxford, and his elder brother Aubrey to death way back in 1462. And he had supposedly had Aubrey in particular executed with really savage brutality on Tower Hill. And Oxford wants to kill Worcester, basically. And this has to be done with a show of legality, with a sort of a state trial. There's no doubt that Worcester will be convicted, but it has to look at least respectable and above board. And in order to preside as his judge, Oxford has to be made the Constable of England, because only the Constable has that power, has that authority. So Warwick makes him Constable, and 3 days later, the 15th of October, pardon me if I glance at my notes occasionally, the 18th of October, 18th of October 1470, Worcester was condemned to death by Oxford. No doubt that was going to happen, and he's beheaded on Tower Hill in exactly the same way as he had had Oxford's father beheaded back in 1462. So Oxford had had his revenge, and in the aftermath he also beefed up his power in East Anglia, which was his main power base, where all of his lands were, Suffolk and Essex and adjoining counties. And he, as you might expect, he exploited this whole situation, this restoration of Henry VI, or the readeption as it's called, to basically grab as much wealth and power in East Anglia as possible at the expense of his neighbours. So he becomes one of the most powerful men in the land, after Warwick and Clarence really, and hopefully can never be forced into exile again. He is there to stay, or so he hopes. It doesn't turn out that way though, because Edward IV, although he has suffered a defeat and been forced to flee his kingdom, he's very much still alive and kicking over in the Low Countries. And Edward makes contact with Charles the Bold, the Duke of Burgundy. Now Charles was opposed to the King of France, King Louis, the Spider King, so called because he was so crafty and forever spinning webs. Now Louis had backed the Lancastrian invasion of England. He had given men, money and ships to Warwick and his friends, but he and Burgundy were at war, and so naturally Edward seeks to forge an alliance with Charles the Bold, because he needs his support if he's ever to have any hope of getting his throne back in England. And Charles, who has his own interests to promote, as far as he's concerned, by supporting Edward, he is indirectly undermining King Louis by attacking Louis's allies in England. This is really a sort of cross-channel conflict involving both the kingdoms of England and France. And so he agrees to support Edward and give him troops and ships so he can return to England and fight Warwick, Clarence and Oxford for his throne. And that's what happens. Edward returns in early 1471, and the stage is set for a final battle for control of England. And this time there must be a battle. The two sides can't sort of shadow box anymore or avoid each other or deal in sort of clever evasive strategies. There's got to be a head-on conflict to decide once and for all who is going to control England and who is going to sit on the throne. Is it going to be Henry or is it going to be Edward? So we shall get to that in the next video, when I shall tackle the decisive battles of Barnet and Tewkesbury, both fought in 1471. I might devote a separate video to each, because they're both very convoluted affairs, as the battles tend to be in this period. Okay, I hope you enjoyed that, and tune in next time. Thank you.